Welcome to the Alcohol Addiction Podcast. My name is Lee Davey. I'm not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I'm someone who doesn't drink alcohol. I spend every waking moment of my life helping other people do the same. Like today, talking to William Poor. How are things, William?
I'm very good, thank you, Lee. How are you?
I'm absolutely fan-dabby-dozy, mate. Fan-dabby-dozy. I'm going to start with an icebreaker, William.
Go on then.
I've got this great book called How Far Will You Go by Evelyn McFarlane and James Saywell. It's full of questions, right?
Okay.
So we're going to choose a question at random. If you don't want to answer it, just say pass. All right? And we'll try 3 of them until you get one. So give me a page number between 1 and 125.
Okay, 49.
49. So look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, you won't like these ones. Right. Question between 1 and 8.
Oh, let's go for 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, this is okay then. What was your best experience in school, William?
Best experience in school? Probably finishing an exam, I would think. That was always a good feeling.
Not getting out of the joint then?
No.
Yeah. Was you someone who liked school then?
To be honest, I didn't mind it. I didn't particularly hate it, but I didn't particularly enjoy it either. I was never one of those people that loved it, but equally I didn't sort of wake up with a stone in my stomach every time it was time to go into school. Although I remember those panicked Sunday nights trying to get all the homework done. Yeah. Well,
let's start there then. What was alcohol like when you was in school, and how did you get involved in it, that kind of stuff?
I started drinking when I was about 14, I think, and funnily enough, it wasn't with anyone I was in school with. I think when I was at school, when I got to, the kind of age where you start knocking around with people and booze and fags start to appear,
yeah.
People I was actually with at school, it was mainly cigarettes, but it was things I had outside of school that I started drinking with, which is a bit of an odd combination. So yeah, I think that's sort of when I got into it. And I suppose it sounds kind of young, but I think that's pretty much par for the course for most people. I don't know anyone that waits to get 18 or 21 or whatever to start drinking, to be honest.
You're from the UK, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say from my experience in the Strive movement, most people in the UK are starting to drink around 14, 15, starting to do everything at 14, 15.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're alone on that one. How did your first foray into messing around with alcohol turn into an addiction to alcohol then?
That went for years actually, because I think how it happened was I started drinking, and I started smoking first and then drinking sort of fairly soon after it. As I say, that was probably about age 14, and then I stopped smoking late teens, early 20s, drinking Alan Carr. And that's really what got me interested in that whole kind of analysing the whole thing sort of side of it. And I stopped smoking, but it's almost like I ended up drinking more because of it.
Right.
So firstly, hangovers were a lot more manageable when you weren't smoking. And also you kind of feel like, wow, I'm not smoking, that's the worst thing, so I can drink as much as I like, basically. So I think that's how it kind of developed. And of course in the UK there's the big binge drinking culture, so I was never someone who drank every day, although for periods I would drink every day, but mainly I was a weekend drinker. But of course weekends kind of expanded both ways.
I was going to say, how old are you, William?
Sorry, say again?
How old are you?
I'm 42 now.
Right, so you're the same age as me. I remember when Friday night was the thing, and then all of a sudden Sunday all day drinking became the thing, and then Thursday became the thing, and then Wednesday became like a student night thing. You're only left with Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So you're just drinking on weekends. You sound very much like a lot of people I knew back in the valley where I grew up, At what point do you notice that, or start to question that, hang on a minute, this is not right? Because at that time, I imagine while you're doing it, the whole kind of society angle on things and your, you know, your zombie-like kind of subconscious thoughts around this thing would have been everything's normal. I'm not doing anything wrong. At what point that changed?
It kind of, I think there were a few things for me that changed it. And I think almost had they not happened, the whole thing would probably have gone on a lot longer. I view like drinking as almost like an evolution. You start off fairly innocuous and it gets progressively worse and worse and worse. And I think there were two things for me which hugely accelerated it. One was I joined the Reserve Battalion of Parachute Regiment mid-late 20s and served out in Iraq. So that accelerated it hugely. Mm-hmm. And then came back from that, got married and had kids. And that was like a huge culture shock for me, which sounds really naive because everyone says that having children changes your life, but I don't think you can quite appreciate how much it changes your life until you actually have them.
Yeah, true.
That was another one for me. And I think the thing was as well, I married someone who doesn't really drink much. So I'm from a culture and background where people drink and drink and drink, whereas my wife doesn't really drink. And I think getting married was a bit of an eye-opener for me because I'd always, like for my family as well, if you go around anytime after midday, the drinks are open and your glass gets topped up constantly. It was a bit of culture shock for me going somewhere where they offer you a drink and you drink it and that's it. It's literally you get offered a drink and you're not expected to drink and drink and drink. So when we got married, from my point of view, I think it was common sense dictated to me that, I should be able to just have one or two and not drink anymore. But when I tried to put that into practice, it just didn't work.
Right.
So it was almost like, had I married someone who was a heavy drinker, I may never have even thought about my drinking. But marrying someone who didn't drink a lot, after a couple of drinks, said, why don't you just stop now? It kind of makes you look at that aspect of it and start to think, actually, I can't stop now, or it's quite unpleasant trying to stop now, and I just want to keep going and going and going. So I think in a way it wasn't that at that point my drinking became a problem, but it was probably at that point that I actually realised it and started to think about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I should imagine having somebody who's living with you who doesn't drink will kind of flick that switch a little bit, I imagine, because all of a sudden you're going out getting wasted and the person you're with most of the time isn't. You'd be like, kind of like, oh, hang on a minute, what's going on here then? Whereas my relationship at the time, we were just going for it. We were drinking buddies. You know, it was never a question. What was it like trying to quit? Like, was it easy? Was it hard? How did you quit? Did you fail numerous times? How did it go for you?
Yeah, I failed. Do you know, I never, it's an odd one. Maybe I'm a bit peculiar, but I never looked at it as failing because I kind of think to myself, right, this is ridiculous. I'm going to stop. And then a few days later, I think, actually, I want to start again. So I know it's probably just me putting a really positive spin on it, but that's just how I saw it at the time. It was really late on that I thought to myself, I'm never going to drink again, because my mindset for a long, long time was not that I'm going to quit drinking, but that I probably need to drink a bit less, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So just underline that so everyone's aware. What you're saying there is you made conscious decisions to stop drinking for a period of time, but then you also made conscious decisions which you're happy with to start drinking again. It wasn't like you were like, oh no, I failed and I have to go back to day one. You were happy to make those decisions.
Yeah, that's right. And I kind of, because I was a binge drinker, I was almost stopping all the time anyway. For me, for a long time, I was concentrating on, I'll stop for this period. And I suppose I didn't really think of it in these terms at the time, but probably looking back on it, what I was hoping for is if you stop for long enough, you can then go back as if you never drunk again.
Yeah.
But of course, it doesn't work that way. It's not a road you can travel backwards on, you know. It's
once you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I mean, for me as well, a lot of it is just, one of the key points is once you know that a drink will take the edge off the bad feeling caused by the previous drinks, that's not something you can unknow. So you could stop for 10, 15, 20, 50 years, but as soon as you wake up with a stinking hangover, you're going to know that a drink's going to take the edge off it and make you feel better. So it's almost a question of you can't unlearn something.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of it was just getting to that stage as well. So yeah, it kind of, when things finally came to a head and stopped, as in, I suppose, me saying I'm going to absolutely stop now, there was probably 2 or 3 times that happened before it finally clicked into place, which, as I say, is probably very low. But on the other hand, it was almost like, if I woke up after a stinking binge feeling absolutely dreadful, my mindset wasn't, I'm going to stop drinking for good. It's, I just need to get through these next few days so that I feel better. And that's all I really thought about at the time. And then as you have got through those few days, you think, oh, I fancy a drink now. So yeah, it didn't, yeah.
When you did decide to quit for good, what was the most difficult aspect of it for you?
Do you know, it's a hard one to say, because I finally stopped in 2014, and it really got to the stage, and I had young kids at the time as well. So I'm not sure. I think for me, probably the hardest part of it was most of my friends, well, in fact, all of my friends are heavy drinkers, and I kind of have all but lost contact with them. But the reason I'm hesitating to say that is because I had young children at the time, and they were having young children at the time, and a couple of them have moved away anyway. One of them's now living over in Finland. It was almost like I was losing contact with them anyway. So it didn't necessarily feel like a drinking thing. So it kind of came at a time of upheaval, and my life was changing quite dramatically anyway. So it was almost like just another change to incorporate in that. But I have to say, I found the social aspect to be more difficult, but that's partly me being lazy, because I went to, Club Soda. I went to a Club Soda pub crawl once and really enjoyed it. And said to myself, I must do more of those because I don't do enough socialising. But just, with a full-time job and young family, you just don't find the time for it. So
I think you made a really good point there for listeners to just reflect on afterwards, is we very often, and you bring this up a lot in your book, when we're caught in this, like the manacles of alcohol or whatever you want to call it, we pin everything on alcohol. So like, as you're saying, when you're stopping drinking, at the same time, there's so many other variables changing in your life. You're having kids, your friends are changing, ebbs and flowing, they're moving around. But so many people with the resistance that's within them that wants to keep themselves drinking, they convince themselves that the reason everything's going to rat shit is they're stopping drinking. They forget that all these other aspects are going on. And it's really good that you're able to stop and reflect and go, hang on a minute. Did my social life change really because of drinking, or was it other things that was happening at the time?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think the problem is as well, because we use alcohol, well, obviously I certainly do, I mean a lot of people do, they use alcohol to deal with problems and take the edge off things. A lot of the time the problems are there, or as you say, the changes are happening, but it's not that stopping drinking has caused them, it's just the method you use to take the edge off them is no longer there for you, so you actually have to face them and deal with them rather than just sort of anaesthetize through them.
Yeah, my big one was my divorce. I remember giving up drinking because my marriage was falling apart, and zoning in on always arguing when we were drinking. So, if I stop drinking, then we'll be all right. And then realizing many, many years later that the reason the marriage was falling apart is because we couldn't communicate ourselves out of a conflict, and we were interested in different things. It was nothing to do with the alcohol. We were just drinking because that's what we did. It wasn't the cause of the relationship breakdown.
I think that's one of the things. It's like a lot of things. You need to get alcohol out of the way so you can deal with certain problems. And it sounds like you got alcohol out the way and realised that your marriage wasn't particularly working anyway. So fine, but at least it wasn't the cause of alcohol. But I think for other people, you can have a very disruptive and confrontational relationship when you're drinking. And actually, when you stop drinking, you can come out thinking, God, this marriage isn't working. But actually, if you give it a few months and things calm down a bit, maybe it does work. So it can go both ways. But I think either way, you can't really address the problem until you take alcohol out of the equation.
One of the saddest things that I see happening, and unfortunately I see it happening a lot, is people stop drinking alcohol thinking that it's going to improve their relationship, or in general because they're unhappy, but their relationship is such a big part of that pie chart of happiness, and then they stop drinking alcohol, and all of a sudden that things get even more disruptive in their relationship, because now obviously they're not drinking and their partner is drinking, and then they start drinking again because they either don't have the confidence or the courage to get over the fear of actually doing something about the relationship, i.e. leaving or whatever, or they can't manage to communicate effectively enough to convince the other person, oh, hey, we've got a problem in our relationship. We need to kind of figure out how to fix it. And kind of what happens is they just say, oh, fuck it. I'm just going to drink so I can connect with my partner, which in itself is pretty nonsensical, because they're not connecting with them. They need to stop drinking so they can connect with them, but they don't really see it.
Yeah, I think it's quite easy to slip into a thing. And I could have done it myself, is end up with someone because you drink with them. The problem is you pretty much get on with anyone if you're both drinking. So you don't know or not. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. All you have to be drunk and then just go into a pub and just realize you're on your own, and you'll just talk to anybody. You're absolutely spot on there.
I think it's true as well. It takes a huge amount of courage to get out of a relationship. That's the other problem.
It's huge.
It's easier to just sit and put up with things as they are.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the statistics where they say 40% or 50% of marriages end in divorce, and that always suggests to me 50% of marriages, that means there's two people sat there very unhappy with not doing anything. I got to admit, I've said this a lot of times in this podcast, I would have probably stayed unhappy in my first marriage for the rest of my life, given the fear of actually pulling the trigger. And once she pulled the trigger and we split up, now that helped me, because then I quit my job, which I don't think I ever would have done had I not had that divorce experience. And now I find it much more easier to make life-changing paradigm shifts because of the experience. You go through it, don't you? And you realize, actually, even though a divorce is absolutely horrific, and it is, I got through it. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a huge emotional upheaval, but I can imagine if the marriage isn't working, getting through it must be a huge relief as well to come out the other way.
There is a tremendous amount of freedom that comes with it, and a lot of reduction in stress and anxiety, which is not, the stress and anxiety of being in a relationship sometimes is more than the stress and anxiety of falling out with everybody and having to split up childcare and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I think human beings are designed to deal with whatever shit Earth is going to throw at you, right? And you don't realize it until you go through it. There's so many people on Strive that have had so many deaths and so many issues and problems, and here they are saying, I don't know how I'm going to manage if I drink again on this. And you're like, whoa, hang on a minute, you've just gone through all this shit. You can deal with it,
Yeah. I think there's someone once said to me, but I can't remember in what context, but this is out of your comfort zone, but not out of your capability. And I think that's hugely true for people. We sit here and we kind of look at things and think they're going to be really dreadful. And actually, of course, you get through them. The vast majority of stuff we do day to day that stresses us out, it's not actually life-threatening.
No. I did a month of facing my fears, and I wasn't jumping off buildings or anything. It was all mental. And I realized that there is a huge difference between the perception of what I'm going to be afraid of and then actually experiencing that thing. That's totally different things. And once you do that, you can get a practice in of realizing that, oh yeah, I'm not going to like this. I'm thinking I'm not going to like it, but I actually know I am going to, because the evidence suggests that I will. So I think putting practices in like that are really good. When I stopped drinking in 2008, 2009, whenever it was, I read Alan Carr's Easy the Way to Control Alcohol, because 7 years before that I'd read his smoking book. So and it worked for me. So I just knew, and as soon as I bought the book, I didn't even read it. I knew I was done. But when I did finish reading the book, William, I was so evangelical. I was. Partly because of ego, I know how to stop drinking, and partly because my wife and everybody around me were fucking falling apart. My mum was falling apart, my dad's falling apart, my mates, my wife, and and I'm trying to help everybody, and I'm falling flat on my face and really screwing it up. And then I said, right, I'm going to make this my life's work. And then I created the podcast, etc., etc. At what point did you turn not a simple, because it's really difficult to stop drinking alcohol, but you stop drinking alcohol, and a lot of people do that and just get on with their life. But you decided to write not just a book, but one of the best books that's out there in this field. I mean, how did that idea come about?
Well, thank you first of all for describing myself. But I mean, when I quit, a couple of times, 2 or 3 phases, I went to AA meetings, and I went to AA meetings almost hoping to get more information on the mechanics, because I thought just how my mind works, I would find that hugely useful. And when I went there, I kind of realised that a lot of people, obviously when you go to AA meetings, you realise that's not what it's based on. It's based a lot more on spirituality, or, higher being, or whatever, higher power, whatever you want to describe it. But what I started to realise was a lot of the people had the same kind of questions I had, and I had what I thought to be answers to some of them. So I kind of started to realise that I probably had a working theory of how it all fitted together. Not all the answers, but a lot of them, and that would be kind of helpful to other people. So I almost did the opposite to you, in that seed was planted in my mind. But I mean, I've still got young children now, but they were even younger then, and a job, so it's a full-time job. My wife works full-time as well. We've got young kids, so it's quite, work's fairly full on, going home's fairly full on. It's all very busy, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to write a book. But the more I thought about it, and it was almost like a dripping tap, it was just preying on my mind, because I was then kind of thinking, if this could help people, you probably ought to do something about it.
Yeah.
I very nearly didn't bother, but it just so happened that where I was working at the time, I went through a very quiet patch. So I was having to turn up at the office, but I mean, I could do my day's work in like 2.5 hours. So I was sat there staring out the window or messing around on the internet most of the day. And I thought, right, well, just try and write whatever you can. So it ended up a sort of an amalgamation of things. I was kind of reluctant to do it. And to be honest, if it hadn't been for that period of quietness at work, where I actually had a few hours a day where I could concentrate on it, I probably would never have done it. But I wrote it without any great expectation, if that makes sense, because one of the things when I was writing it, I was thinking, I'm explaining how it all fits together, but so what? What's the reaction going to be? Yeah, thanks for telling me, but how does that help me? So I kind of almost wrote it without any great expectation, but almost just to appease my conscience, just to think, well, if I've done it, I've done it. And to be honest, it didn't go anywhere for a while, because I wrote it, sent it to quite a few agents, and no one was interested. And I thought, well, that's fine. Okay, I've done it. Peace of conscience, I've done what I can, and I stuck it to one side. And then I can't remember how I found out about Kindle, where you can sell books from Kindle. So I thought, oh, okay. So I stuck it on there. And to be honest, I was fairly naive in that I didn't do any marketing or anything. I just put it on there, and you can give it away for 3 days every 3 months. So I did that twice, and nothing particularly happened. And then like the odd sale would come through, and then it just sort of escalated, which is, I presume, people recommending it. So that was it, really. As I say, it was almost a direct opposite of you, because I kind of stopped, and it was after that, in those first, I can't remember, 6-8 months, year of stopping, that I was kind of thinking, you probably do have some ideas or certain knowledge that could probably help people. And it kind of coincided with that period at work when I could actually spend time writing it.
Yeah, it's a brilliant book, because the reason I never wrote a book myself was I thought to myself, what's the point? Like, Alan Carr's done it. Like, yeah. I remember reading his book thinking, if anybody wants to know how to stop drinking, I'll just tell them to read Alan Carr's book. And then I read Jason Vale's, and I was like, that's Alan Carr's book. And then I read This Naked Mind. I was like, that's Alan Carr's book. So I really didn't want to do that and just add a twist on it. I think I'm in a better position to do it now. But yours is much better because it really does lay out what's going on inside of your mind, you know, and biologically and psychologically in a real kind of like Lego building kind of way. Like I love it. I mean, for me, it's great. You know, like I get really put off by the biology and science. Like I'm like, I don't want to know that because I'm worried and I'm afraid of it. But you made it accessible and palatable. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, because what I tried to do was to have the science as I thought of it, how I picture it. Because if someone starts talking about like, I don't know, neural pathways and neurons, and I don't relate to that. It doesn't mean anything to me. But if I understand it as in, this makes you feel bad and this makes you feel bad, that's how I relate to it. Yeah. So that was the sort of terms I was thinking of it in. And that's then, in a way, I almost wrote the book for myself because it was just, no matter how well you think you know something, when you either go to teach it or write it down, you firstly help to sort of clarify it and set it out better, but also you always then realise you don't understand it and there's questions you still need to answer. But yeah, I tried to make it scientific, i.e. there's a basis of fact on it, but how I interpret it. So as I said, I didn't go to the level of, you know, the atomic level of neural pathways and the rest of it that really relate to it.
So
yeah, I sort of tried to pitch it. It's almost like looking at a huge picture. If you get too far away, you can't see it, obviously. But equally, if you get too close to it, you kind of lose the bigger picture.
It was fantastic, and we're going to, you know, we're going to make it a part of the curriculum somehow. Not all of it, but certain aspects and parts of it, with like our education, getting everybody to buy the book, that kind of thing. Because, you know, like I said, there was Alan Carr, there's yours. And then what you have out there, it's just like memoir stuff, you know. Yeah. I like reading that because I can see that someone was in the same fucked up mess as me. But it doesn't. I'm not quite sure of there's a certain amount of power in that, but you get that anyway within in our Strive movement. You know, just talking with people every day. What people really want is, do me a favor, tell me how to quit this thing, you know, and that's what your book does. Bear in mind, though, you still have to be very radically open-minded, because I think part of the problem with things like Alan Carr and your book, for example, is once you read it, you do end up saying to yourself, and I know this happened for me with Alan Carr, hang on a minute, I've been drinking for 3 decades, and you're telling me that it offers me no value whatsoever. And there's almost like an ego resistance to it, that there's no way that I can make this easy. Like for me, stopping alcohol was really easy. And it took me a long time to come out of my shell and admit that, because I thought to myself, I'm not going to be relatable to people here because everybody thinks it's so hard. But then I realized, no, I have to tell people that it doesn't have to be hard. It can be that easy. But the ease of the information and the knowledge and the understanding, and what you said earlier on, seeing the unseen. Once you've seen the unseen, you can't unsee what you've seen, or you know. Yeah. For me, once I got around that and looked at the death effect, didn't occur to me anymore. It wasn't there, and I was able to get through it. But I think people who've tried like 1 million times to stop drinking may struggle with it. But in the main, I thought it's fantastic. I'm going to do it after I finish with you at 2:00. I'm actually doing a book review on it for an hour. Yeah. So, and I've given you a 5-star review on Amazon, just to let you know.
Excellent.
So I'm going to ask you some questions on the book. Okay. So I am always encouraging people in Strive and the Truth About Alcohol. Strive is the name of our movement, by the way, our forum, our group. Okay. And the Truth About Alcohol is our philosophy. And I'm always saying to people, look, if you want to become someone who doesn't drink alcohol, every time you feel triggered, every time you feel an urge, a desire, or craving to drink alcohol, it's really important that you come to Strive and you talk about it so we can analyze the reasons why you believe you're drinking and hack away cognitively at your thought processes around that, right? And this is where your book really helps. And one of the archetypes that I see regularly, because I'm a great believer that a lot of people create, pick up or inherit stories that they associate with alcohol that strengthens their will and desire to keep drinking. And one of these is around the buzz, right? The buzz of alcohol. And this bothers me, William, because I drank for a long time and I don't ever remember having a buzz, ever, right? So I really struggle to relate to people with it. And there's the archetype that I get all the time. It's just that hit, the immediate hit I get drinking water out of a Heineken glass. When the warmth of the liquor goes down my throat and burns my throat, and I get that immediate hit, I will miss that. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think there's an immediate hit. Like,
no.
Can you explain what's going on when somebody drinks a hard liquor?
Yeah, well, I suppose if you're talking about the burning on your throat, that's your brain or your body telling you you're drinking a poison and you need to stop very quickly.
Right, say that again. Say that again. Right?
If you're drinking like neat whiskey, it burns, and the reason your brain is telling you that burns is because it's not good.
Right. It's a natural defense to tell you don't drink any more of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the problem is, if you've been doing it for the last 20 years, your brain is associating that burning feeling with the anaesthetizing effect. So and this is part of the addiction process. And the same with the taste of it. Alcohol it's a poison, so it doesn't taste nice, but you can acquire a taste for it. And all that is your brain thinking it's good for you. So, without wanting to go into too much detail, but so all life on the planet is to eat to survive. And part of that is a pre-programmed ability to appreciate the difference between poison and food. So poison tastes bad and food tastes good. That's fairly good. But the problem is life on the planet, and no life on this planet has a consistent supply of food. We need to be able to adapt. So when you become hungrier and hungrier, you'll eat things that you wouldn't normally eat. When you're absolutely starving, you'll eat absolutely anything that you can get into your mouth. But how the body or brain works is if you consume something and it makes you feel better, you feel good for it, then you can acquire a taste for it. So you can adapt to new types of food if your normal food source disappears. So the problem with alcohol, in fact, the problem with all drugs is it tricks the body into thinking it's doing something good, but it isn't. So alcohol is a depressant, so it anesthetizes or inhibits nerve activity. So if you're feeling hungry or stressed or tired or angry, it will take the edge off it. So every time you drink a drink, it will burn, which is your body telling you no, but your brain soon associates that burning feeling with, oh no, actually, I thought that was bad, but actually it's very good because I'm no longer hungry, tired, stressed, whatever. And it thinks something good has happened to the body, whereas actually it's just a drug tricking your senses, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And just a few questions that come up. So, on the buzz side of things, so when people come to me and say, I drink because of the buzz, I then get them to rate that buzz out of 10 and then compare that with the other natural buzzes or the artificial buzzes they get in life. And suddenly they find that the buzz that they think they get off alcohol is way, way, way down the pecking order, which then allows us to say, okay, can we rule out that you drink alcohol because of the buzz right now? Because if you really want a buzz, then we know that injecting heroin is going to give you a better buzz than alcohol, right? Or we know that an orgasm is going to give you a better buzz than alcohol, or whatever, right? But I was interested when I was reading your book. I've never taken heroin, but I've seen enough TV to know that as soon as they stick the needle in their arm, because it's injected, which you say in your book is the best way to get an effect of a drug straight away, right? Right? Yes. And you see them, they inject it and boom, they're out. Okay. Now, I used to snort speed when I was younger. So funny. I used to take speed when I was younger and everybody just used to lick it. Right. Oh, not this dickhead. I'd get me £5 note, not a 20, a £5 note, roll it up, and I'd be there snorting it and it'd hurt like fuck. And I would be like, oh, I wouldn't tell anyone it was hurting, but I thought I was Al Pacino, right? But I learned from your book that actually snorting it is the second quickest way to get it in your system.
Yeah, I forget which way around it is because
injecting and snorting. Now, even when I snorted speed, I didn't get an immediate hit. I got an immediate bad nose, and then slowly over time it came. So back to alcohol. If I'm knocking back my bourbon and now I've got a burn in my throat, yeah, we know that that's Mother Nature telling us that we shouldn't be doing it. But when is the hit coming, William?
Yeah, that's going to be further down the line. You can't feel it immediately. It's not physically possible.
How further are we talking here?
It depends on a few things because it needs to go down into your stomach, and then I think it goes into the small intestine. I think a bit of the alcohol is absorbed in your stomach, but then it goes onto the small intestine, which is when the majority of it is absorbed. So you're talking about like that depends on what you've got in your stomach. So if you've had a full meal, it's going to be 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. It also depends on if you've been exercising. So if you've done a 10-mile run and you haven't eaten all day, it's going to hit your system a hell of a lot quicker. But even then, it's going to it's not immediate. It's not like having a cigarette. It's not immediate. It takes a second or two for it to hit the bloodstream and get to the brain. But no, it's not possible to get a high, as you're describing it, from drinking knock back a large whiskey or something. You don't get it that quickly. It's not possible. It can only be psychological at that stage.
And so what we're talking is then the buzz that we do get is just going to be a gradual kind of.
It's a dulling more than anything. That's how I describe it. It's a dulling sensation because it's an anaesthetic. It's a depressant. It dulls. But I think one of the problems is because we tend to drink in social situations. Human beings, when they socialise, they get dopamine dropped into their system, which makes them feel good.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, and I think this was Alan Carr's point, what you think is a good feeling from drinking is actually just the dopamine that you get from socialising generally.
Yeah, I think serotonin as well, because it's a social kind of neurotransmitter, right? So again, you get in, and even if we just bypass the neurochemicals a minute and get rid of all the science jargon, it's going back to what we said earlier on, isn't it? About really dissecting and having a real kind of laser-like focus on uncovering why this is happening. Why do I think it's alcohol? And I use this experiment called the room, where you're in a room like you are now. It looks like you're on your own. Let's just give you a couple of bottles of wine and a notepad and a pen, and you're only to write, stuff related to how you feel about drinking. Yeah. But then after a while, I'll stick a mate in there with you. And then I'll stick a TV with the Manchester Derby on. And then I'll stick a stripper in there. Then I'll stick a jukebox. And each time I do this, your feel-good factor and the neurochemicals and how you feel about that situation is going to improve. But when I start removing those things, it's going to get worse. But it doesn't get worse when I remove the alcohol. Because the alcohol is not what's giving you the buzz. It's the red herring. I might as well have a pen in my hand. And you're saying, oh, this pen is really giving me a buzz socially.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's the situation we tend to drink in, and we tend to drink at the end of the day. So you get out of work, you feel good finishing work anyway. And then you meet your mates, and yes, it's nice to meet your mates. So all of these things is what gives the actual feeling of pleasure. I was reading, what's it called? Drugs Without the Hot Air by a chap called Professor David Nutt. Now he works for the government, and his line is he does work on drugs, and he was working on the board that classifies them as A, B, C, whatever. Mm-hmm. And he made reference to quite an interesting study where there was I forget the name of it, I don't know the details, but there was a drug and it had an actual medical reason for people taking it. So I think it was young people who had this medical problem. They take this drug, but it had a mind-altering side effect. So when they were given this drug, they were asked about how they felt about it, and they really didn't like it. It gave them this rather unpleasant feeling. But then a little while later, it was starting to be sold illegally, and people were taking it as like a feel-good drug.
Right.
He then quoted all these different studies where what you expect of a drug is what you get from it. So if you're expecting something to make you feel good, it will make you feel good. If you're not expecting it at all, it can be horrendous. And that's why you hear, there was a story going around here recently when someone had put some speed into someone's morning coffee and they completely flipped out. Now, you're talking about taking speed. Taking speed generally makes you feel quite good. Yeah. If you're not expecting it and you just suddenly have those feelings, it's probably fairly terrifying. So a lot of what you get with a drug is what you expect of it. And I think exactly what you said, it's a hugely powerful thing, is to sit in a room without TV, radio, friends, anything, just sit there and have a drink and see how it makes you feel. And it can best be described as a dulling effect. You just feel slightly dulled. It's not a particularly pleasant feeling.
And you'll be bored out of your mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Especially in today's society where we can't like let go of our mobile phone for 2 minutes, sitting in a room with 2 bottles of wine for an hour. Really, that's enough to do it. One more thing I want to ask you about the book. And I hope you listen to my book review podcast. I'm going to be talking about your book for a whole hour. These thoughts you had on the AA section, you said, when the spiral of craving starts, it can be very overpowering, but it's entirely mental, albeit that it is usually triggered by physical feelings of stress or anxiety. And indeed, this is what defeats most people when attempting to quit anything or even when attempting to diet. And you say by turning everything over to God, which is the AA philosophy, you can effectively end the spiral, providing it's done correctly. And then you give an example, right? So let's assume an individual is right in the middle of a really bad spiral of craving, just about to cave in, suddenly turns everything over to God, and he effectively stops thinking about having a drink because he's now resolved himself of these responsibilities. Can you talk a little bit about that? And if we're not into giving all our power away to a powerful entity that we don't even know exists, what could we do in its place?
Yeah, sure. So the starting point is just to understand what a craving is. And it is just fantasizing about something. So when you start thinking about drinking, you start fantasizing about it. And I think that there's a few points to take away from that. Firstly, bear in mind what fantasies are. When you fantasize about something, you're looking only at the good part of it. So you never go into all the bad part. That's just the nature of fantasies. It's just some weird fairy tale about only the good. But when you start thinking about, say, for example, having a drink, you can't then concentrate on anything else because you're thinking about, I want that drink, and either I want it, I can't have it, or I want it, but I shouldn't have it, but should I have it? Suddenly you're entirely taken up with what is a fairly unpleasant mental spiral because you're thinking about, I want it and I can't have it, I want it, should I have it, but there's all these reasons not to have it, and I said I wouldn't have it. But basically what it is, you're just in a spiral of wanting something that you can't have. It sounds fairly straightforward, but we all know it can be very overpowering, but it's a conscious thought process. So one of the things, or the main crux of AA, is that then you just turn it over to your higher power. So if you're just suddenly sitting back and saying, you know what, I'm not having anything to do with this, you, the higher power, take it, you've done really all you need to do to end the craving because you've taken it out of your mind. You've stopped agonizing about, I want the drink, I can't have it, I shouldn't have it, blah, blah, blah. The whole lot's gone. And that's basically what the craving process is. You've just ended it. So one of the things I always say, there's numerous ways you can do it. You can try and put your mind onto something else if you can do. So if you're sat there craving an alcoholic drink, if you can suddenly get taken up with something else, that's all well and good. But for me, the easiest and best way of dealing with it is to just be realistic, because remember, it's a fantasy, it's not reality. And when you think about, if you're sat there fantasizing about having a drink, what you're thinking about is taking out that ice cold beer out of the fridge, or pouring a glass of wine or your spirit or whatever and sitting back in your armchair relaxing and drinking, or sitting there with your friends. That's fine, but that's the fantasy, that's not the reality. So all I say is just to kill the fantasy, just factor in the reality. Now the reality is, we've already spoken about, one, there's going to be no particular high from it. The other factors obviously covered in the book is that any good feeling you're going to get from it is going to very quickly dissipate and leave a corresponding feeling of anxiety. And then what are you going to do? You're going to have another drink and another and another and another and get absolutely hammered? Or are you just going to sit there for the rest of the day feeling anxious, even more anxious than you began with, because now you've got the alcohol withdrawal? One of the big things for me that I hated and I can't get over being so happy to be free of is that waking up at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, feeling absolutely exhausted and hungover, but not able to get back to sleep. And that thing of no matter how long you're in bed for, you're still getting up the next day absolutely exhausted. So factor all that in. If you're craving a drink, think of the entire process. Think of the very limited, what you call the high, which we've already talked about, and realise that it's not actually there anyway. But then think about, well, how you feel half an hour after the drink and an hour after it, and how you feel at 4 in the morning when you're lying there worrying and unable to sleep. And that's the thing I find most effective, to be quite honest. I was on
William? William? Okay, we got broken up then, William, and I can't remember what you were talking about. I can't hear you. Now I can.
No. Yeah. I think we're talking about cravings,
yes.
AA, and what to do without turning to a higher power.
Yeah. Can you remember where you was?
I was basically just saying the best way for me to end cravings is just to remove the fantasy.
That was it. Remove the kill the fantasy by introducing reality.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you were talking about extending that knowledge and understanding of your reality further down the line. Like, how am I going to be feeling in the night in several days?
Yeah, I think you start at the immediate. So what pleasure would there be in actually having the drink? But then just follow it through over the next few hours, couple of days, whatever. And I think, to be honest, the thing for me is, and I think this is quite a crux for a lot of people, is to understand why why it's so difficult to have one. Because then it's all very easy to think, yeah, but I could just have one. But actually, if your question isn't just to have one, it's to get absolutely hammered.
Yeah,
that's another completely different kettle of fish as well. So I think that's a key point as well, just understanding the dynamics around moderation.
If you're listening to this and you have a question that emerges out of a break, so we just had a break there, and you was into William, and I got a little bit lost. If there's something that you want William to explain more, drop me an email at thetruthaboutalcohol@gmail.com. I'm sure William will write you a short little email if that's the case. Is that okay, William?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, one final question before I let you go. This is from Serena. Serena is a Truth About Alcohol moderator. And Serena says, I have a concern that the great work that you do and that I do and others in this field is not accessible to the many people that need it the most. Those people who don't have high levels of health literacy and or the means to be able to fully participate in all that is required to stop drinking. Alcohol use has a strong social gradient, not necessarily a linear one, i.e. the more disadvantaged groups don't necessarily drink more, but they definitely have poor outcomes as a result. I wondered what William's thoughts were on how best to address these inequalities so that his work has a greater impact.
That's an interesting one. I wrote the book in what I would consider to be fairly straightforward language, so I'd hope most people would be able to read and understand it. But actually on the website, for quite recently, I did a talk at Lancaster Royal Infirmary about that alcohol liaison unit.
Right.
And if you go to the website, which is alcoholexplained.com, there's a part there which is, I can't remember what I called it now, videos or animations or seminars or something. And one of them in there is actually the talk I did for the alcohol liaison unit at the Royal Lancaster Infirmary. It doesn't deal with the entire book. It just deals with it starts with the physiological effects of drinking and a few of the aspects surrounding that. So that's on there. But frankly, if I get any feedback that it's useful and can you expand it into more of them, I'll do more of them. So if people are genuinely illiterate and can't read, they would hopefully find that fairly useful. Other than that, well, saying that, the book's in Audible as well, so it's narrated. So if you can't read, you can at least listen to it. But yeah, it is a difficult one because I appreciate the question.
It is really difficult, because I found this difficult as well because I want to reach as many people as I can, but in order for me to dedicate myself to this full time, I have to somehow turn it into a living so I can stop doing what I'm doing for a living. And again, that's really difficult because then the masses who need this aren't necessarily able to afford or have the time or get their head around some of the things that you need to get your head around to kind of get into this. So it is a very interesting question, but I do believe that your book is written in the language of the common man. So I think anybody will be able to pick that up and read it. And having different forms of learning like videos would be really good. So I'll direct people to your site, William. I will. Last question, and then I'll let you go. How does it feel to be someone that doesn't drink alcohol, William?
It feels good. I think it's been long enough now that I've almost gone the other way in that I feel how I feel. And when I look back at when I was drinking, I think, why on earth did I do that? I was either weekends, and by weekends I'm now talking, like Thursday through to Tuesday. I was so drunk I didn't really know what was going on, and the rest of the time I was recovering from it, and I just think, why on earth did I do it? So I think if you stop in the correct way, when you first stop like you did, you feel good for it. And I think I'm going beyond that now, but I now look back on it and think, why on earth did I bother doing it?
What was going through my mind?
Yeah.
William, thank you for being a guest on the Deconstructing podcast and for writing a quite exceptional book. Really grateful that you did. You're gonna save a lot of people's lives.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
No worries. Cheers.